I've handpicked 10 video games where the whole objective is busting out of prison, and I'm going to be judging them from their overall quality to how well they scratch my prison break itch. But I'll also judge it on its prison breakiness, which I'll explain later. You may be wondering why I'm doing this. Well, I love prison breaks, and I've always wanted to experience one in real life, but I can't go to prison. So I want to know what the best way to experience one in a video game is. Now this may sound simple, but spoiler alert, it was a lot more difficult than I expected. Not all these games are created equal. We are going to be looking at everything from terrible games to games loved by the masses to some seriously hidden gems. Speaking of which, let's begin with Surreal Software's 2004 action horror, Lust. In this game, you play as Torque, a family man who's been sent to Abbott Penitentiary, a fictional prison on Carnate Island, for murdering his entire family. An earthquake on the island causes the release of all the prisoners and the release of terrifying half-human monsters. It plays very much like a Resident Evil game, but it's a little bit more action-oriented. I included it in the video because I wanted to show that while it's set in a prison, it's not a true prison break game. It's just a survival horror and the prison is the backdrop. But besides that, the game is pretty sick. It's got some stellar story, world building, the voice acting's fantastic, and it's fun to play. Overall, the suffering is great, but it's not very prison breaky. So to expand on the idea of prison breakiness, a truly prison breaky game should be all about escaping, and the mechanics and tropes and game design involved should revolve around that. Games are interactive, and I want real choices in how I escape, or at the very least engaging gameplay built around it. I am very excited to talk about this next game, developed by Moldy Tooth Studios and published by Team 17. This is the Escapists. The Escapists is a wonderful little game, and quite possibly the most popular game on this list. It's sort of a sandbox strategy game where you're one prisoner in one of many different prisons and you just have to escape. This game is a real contender for being the best prison break game. It is the definition of prison breakiness. It really has a solid gameplay loop of seeing how much you can prep and plan towards your escape in each day and needing to be present at roll call and lunch and stuff like that. The daily schedule system is a recurring feature that is in many of the games on this list, and the Escapists probably does it the best. Obviously there are set ways to escape, but unlike the game's sequel, it's a little bit more open-ended. You can kind of do half of one escape scenario and then finish it off with the second half of a different one, if that makes sense. The game is very unforgiving, and if I had to critique it at all, it would be that there's just no narrative element. So I'm interested to see if we can find a game that's as prison breaky as the Escapists, but also introduces a story that will really grip us, you know? And although the game does lack that traditional narrative, it's still incredibly prison breaky. This next one is an interesting one. This is Wide Games' 2002 stealth title, Prisoner of War. In this game, you play as one Captain Stone. It's a story-driven stealth game where the main game is to break out of different P.O.W. camps. You meet lots of interesting NPCs, and there's a little bit of freedom, which I think really contributes to its prison breakiness. Online, I saw a lot of people very nostalgic for this game, and a lot of other people saying it really doesn't hold up. I mean, it was made in 2002, and in my opinion, it really doesn't. It's not good. Graphically, it's not bad for 2002, but the sound design, it is bad. It's rough. There's parts where the music is so obnoxiously loud, and then there's parts in narrative elements like cutscenes and stuff where there's just no music, and there really should be. P.O.W. does have some very interesting and novel design elements that really help with the game's prison breakiness, and also you can buy extra items that are completely optional and do extra quests that are optional so that they can help you do extra stuff in future missions. Overall, it's a cool game, and whilst time hasn't been kind to it, it's officially pretty prison breaky. I showed the Prison Break TV show video game in the thumbnail of this video. It's called Prison Break The Conspiracy, but the conspiracy was the internet conspiring against me to make it impossible for me to find or play this game. It's never been released digitally, and I spent a solid 2 or 3 evenings trying to get it on my PC, and every way I attempted failed. Every game played on the Dunyan Ring show is acquired through legal means. I really wanted to play it, but short of buying a PS3 and a capture card, it just wasn't happening. Since I couldn't play it, I can't in good faith include it in this video, but I did say we played 10 games, so I've got a substitute that we'll talk about a little bit later. I have to say, I'm a big movie video game guy. If anybody knows me, they'll know that King Kong, the official game of the movie, was really seminal for me as a kid. But I have never seen the movie that this one ties into. This is Pivotal Games' 2003 title, The Great Escape. I assumed this game came out before P.O.W. when I played it. I hadn't realized that it was the opposite. The Great Escape is literally such a similar game to P.O.W., but it actually has less features than P.O.W. It doesn't have a daily schedule system like P.O.W., and it's just go here, do that, go here, do that. There's no, optional items and player agency, which is a huge thing for Prison Breakiness, as we already said. So whilst The Great Escape does feel a better game, and it is fun and light and sometimes challenging and tense, nostalgia is really the only thing it's got going for it, and in terms of Prison Breakiness, it is not Prison Breaky at all, I would say. I am so excited to talk about this next game because I feel like it's one of those games that everybody's heard about but nobody's actually played, and boy, let me tell you, it is the silliest fucking game on the planet. Is it very Prison Breaky? Yes. And not at all at the same time. It's an enigma. Developed by Hazel Light Studios and published by EA, this is A Way Out. In this game, you and another person play as two inmates in the same prison who team up to escape together. Their relationship is so funny because it's literally just like, this guy's smart and this guy's reckless. We're gonna butt heads, but by the end of this, be the best of friends. You know the gist, they need to find a way out of the prison they're in. It's really about these two guys' individual stories and exacting revenge on the man that wronged them both. Ugh, it's gritty, it's good stuff. That said, there's a big portion of this game at the beginning that's set in the prison, and that portion of the game, narratively, is fucking paint by numbers. And the numbers are 1 and 2. The entire game is just a whole QuickTime event. I mean, that happens after you leave the prison as well, but at least the story gets interesting. The real fun of the game is playing it with a friend of yours, because you just get up to so much kooky shit, and if you don't take it too seriously, it's genuinely the funniest game.
My back's reached it, I can't reach it.
Are you driving with one hand?
Yeah.
I played it with a long-time friend of mine, Seamus, and we were literally dying the entire time we played. Honestly, the most interesting part to me about this game is when you make it out of the prison and the story still continues. I mean, if you don't think the inmate's story after he escapes is important, then I'll direct you to this scene. Thank you very much, and good night. So if you want to play a game with your friend that's fun and has a load of really cool Prison Break tropes in it, this is the one for you. Just be warned, mechanically, the game's not Prison Breaky. Now, this is the most recently released game that we'll be covering this video. This is Wooden Aliens 2024 turn-based survival roguelite Space Prison. You're a space prisoner in a Guardians of the Galaxy-esque space prison, and you need to break out. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do in this game. You can be in a gang, which is a huge Prison Break trope that none of the games we've covered so far have done. You can also recruit rats to fight for you, and you can make them capes and knuckle dusters out of newspapers and like scraps you find in the bin. It's cool. And there's also like restricted areas that you can go in to get unique loot. Spicy prison. What is this, like porn? And whilst there's not a daily schedule system, you do have to be back in your cell before lights out, and that's pretty cool. Honestly, the strength of this game isn't its Prison Breakiness. It's really just, it's a well-designed game. The roguelite elements are incredible. When you die, you basically transfer your consciousness into another alien that has different abilities. Space Prison is definitely a sleeper that you should check out, and it's kind of Prison Breaky, to be honest. So like I said, since I couldn't play Prison Break The Conspiracy, we do have a backup game, Prison Architect. Now, I know what you're thinking, Prison Architect is a management sim, and you handle the running and building of your prison, as well as riots, escapes, and general upkeep. But little did I know, it actually has its own escape mode. And whilst it's not as polished as the other dedicated Prison Break games in this video, it has some cool mechanics. The best part, in my opinion, is that via the Steam Workshop, you can download and then escape from any prison that's been created by the community, which means that you could create any prison imaginable and then escape from it. And whilst the escape mode is not very fleshed out, mechanically or gameplay-wise, I think the novelty of being able to put yourself in any prison imaginable is worth it to put in the video. Overall, Prison Architect's escape mode is fun, it's unique, and in theory, it's kind of Prison Breaky. Now this is an interesting one. It's the only sequel in this video, so let's see if it does a good job building on its predecessor. I am of course talking about The Escapists 2. Now, the thing about the Escapists 2 is that they improved so many things from the first game, and they kind of took a step back in other departments. The game as a whole is easier to grasp mechanically and does a much better job explaining on how to do certain things. And also, each prison's daily schedule changes. It does that in the Escapists 1, I just forgot to tell you. Although the issue I have with it is that it really boils down a lot of the escape scenarios, with the Escapists 2 having them almost as cutscenes that activate when you bring the necessary materials. Personally, I think the sequel is better than its predecessor, but I like to see it as there's value in both games, and they're kind of two sides of the same coin, offering a slightly different experience with the same core gameplay concept. As far as prison breakiness goes, I think this game ranks higher than its predecessor, mostly because the escape scenarios kind of have a bit of a narrative feeling to them. Overall, it is still a sandbox game, so it does still lack that narrative we were talking about earlier. The Escapist 2 is perfectly prison breaky. And it's fun with friends.
What's your name?
El Más Suave. It's it's Spanish for the smoocher.
So another oldie and another pretty cool old game. This is Tygon Studios' 2004 stealth action classic, The Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher's Bay. Now, this game is interesting because it's old, but also one thing we just got to talk about right at the bat, like the voice acting in this game is incredible. Like the opening cutscene with Johns and Riddick is so good. Vin Diesel's voice is amazing. And also I think like the cast is pretty cool as well. Steve Bloom is knocking around there at some point, and this guy sounds like Merle from The Walking Dead. I don't know if it is. When I'm editing, I'm sure I'll check that out.
It's him. His name is in the opening credits.
I must confess, I didn't stick around very long in this game. It's the same situation with The Suffering. The prison is the backdrop of this cool action game, and it plays really fun, but, you know, I wasn't playing it to play through the story and, you know, do the same mechanics again. I'm looking for games where the mechanics are about breaking out of prison. You know what I mean? But that said, if you're into old games, this is awesome. So I strongly recommend it. The Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher's Bay is officially not prison breaky, but it is sick. This game came out of nowhere and it's amazing. It's definitely a dark horse for this video. This is Spiral Up Games' 2023 title, Back to the Dawn. In this game, you play as a journalist named Thomas Fox, who's working on a big story all centered around the corrupt mayor of Furrytown. That's not the name of the town, but everybody in this game is an animal like Zootopia. It's pretty cool. Anyway, the game is a wonderful little survival RPG in which you have 21 days to escape the maximum security prison you've been locked up in. What I really enjoyed most about this game is that it has got, by far, the best world building of any of the other games in this video. When I say world building, I'm not referring to the setting per se, but the prison itself is so fleshed out and interesting. There's like a trading system with every NPC in this game, and you can give them gifts. And if you give them the right gifts enough times, you get the opportunity to do a challenge for them, and if you succeed that challenge, you become friends, and they tell you why they're locked up, and they give you a really valuable skill. There is also a gang system in this game in which you can work for the different gangs and do quests kind of screwing over the other gangs. My personal favorite is the Black Claw gang. They're like moneylenders, and you can often find their gang leader, Caesar, who is a chimp, painting in the art room. He's cool. He's cool as fuck. But if you don't want to go down the gang route, you can build a relationship with the guards, especially the head guard, who will have you do quests trying to screw over the gang leaders, and you can become a prison snitch. There is combat and crafting alongside this relationship mechanic. Although the game's crafting and escape mechanics aren't as deep as the Escapist franchise, it does have that narrative that we were talking about earlier. I believe there's like 8 different escape scenarios in which you have to do a bunch of different missions to see through, and there's also a couple of different endings, and they're not the same thing. It kind of reminded me of Stardew Valley. Lots of people to talk to, lots to do, and lots to discover if you're interested. The game does have a great narrative, and it's very prison breaky. So where does that leave us? Well, we've looked at some great games, some not so great games, and some genuine classics. I feel like only picking one winner would do a disservice to all these great games. I am going to only pick one winner, but there's going to be some runner-up prizes as well. If you want the best old game on this list, I strongly recommend The Suffering and The Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher's Bay. Honestly, I'm so torn between the two. Both are fantastic games for completely different reasons, but yeah, as we discovered, not really that prison breaky. If you want the most enjoyable prison break experience, I strongly recommend goofing around in A Way Out with one of your homies. And finally, if you want the Dunyan Ring Show's take on the best prison break game, you should play Back to the Dawn. It feels wrong not showing some love to the Escapists because I can so clearly see that franchise's effect on Back to the Dawn, but one of the reasons I love Prison Break stories is because they are stories, and there's characters in them, and the prison has its own identity, and Back to the Dawn just has all of that in spades. You should know, I love all video games, regardless of whether I think they're good or bad, so if any of the games in this video pique your interest, you should definitely look into playing them. Check out the Patreon if you want the extended gameplay cut of this video, and subscribe as well because we're going to have a lot more videos coming up like this. With all that said, I have been Dunyan Rings from, what's the name of the prison? From Got Busted Penitentiary, and I'm free now, I suppose. Goodbye.